Hello everyone, I hope you are uncommonly well. And in saying that, I don't mean that you think the world is doing well, but I hope you're doing well because you have that in your control. I'm Mrs. Sherman. Welcome to Homemakers Radio. If you're new here, please click the link in the description below and go to the post where I have embedded this video and see the summary and see some photographs of the manse. And ladies, I have had a wonderful weekend, and I hope you have too. It was really no big deal. I had a low-key, no big deal house tour from some of the church members. I hadn't done anything beyond what you've seen in these videos, and they don't get to see things like that very much. Many people have been home for a long time, kind of cooped up, and so I think they appreciated it more, even though I had brown paper decorations and little homemade things around. They really enjoyed it. Maybe gave them some ideas too. But I hope it was quite stimulating to them. And one of my children came over and he and I watched a movie. It was called It Happened on Fifth Avenue. And so he's a very smart, of course he's smart. I homeschooled him. He's in his 40s now, and so while I was getting this all set up, he looked this up and he found out something very interesting about it. It happened on Fifth Avenue. Now I know the minute I say that, you say, "Oh, that's the one about the single mother looking for a place to live, and she has a little girl, and Santa leaves his cane at the door." And no, that's not what this is at all. This is It Happened on Fifth Avenue, and so he looked it up and he found out that it was released within the same year, or maybe it was a year apart. I'm not sure which came first, of the other film. It Happened on 45th Street or whatever it was, the other one about the Santa Claus, and then it was taken away. It was taken out, and it wasn't republished till maybe 10 years ago. And so as we were watching it, we thought maybe we could figure out why. And he did. He had a lot of ideas as to why this film was not released to the public for a long time. Of course, it could have had something to do with an inheritance or, someone in the family not releasing it. And he looked up all the actors and what their year was that they lived. And it was really a very nice film. But you could see things in it that were of a political nature that the government wouldn't have liked out there, about the homeless and about GIs coming home from war and nowhere to live, even though they'd been promised money and guaranteed a house. And so he looked up some of these things, and we had a very, very lively discussion about how it could have possibly been taken out of circulation for so many years, and the other one promoted. Well, it could have been a competitive movie that someone didn't want to. It would have been probably more liked, but what it was about, I'll just read on the back of it, and I've read this to you before. Making his winter home in a vacant New York City mansion owned by vacationing industrialist Michael O'Connor, a philosophizing hobo decides to take in a homeless ex-GI. See, the hobo moved into this rich man's house when he went south to warmer climes for the winter. And then when he came back and left his summer home, the hobo moved into the summer home, and he never left a trace, just like the stealth campers. They warn on their videos that they published on YouTube that if you want a stealth camp, don't leave any evidence that you were there. Pick up all your trash, pick up other people's trash too, and come out of the woods carrying a trash bag over your shoulder so people will think you're just picking up trash, and they won't think that you're a hobo. So let me finish reading this. So this hobo moves in when this industrialist, Michael O'Connor, is vacationing, and then he meets a homeless GI, government employee, ex-soldier, at a park bench, who just sleeps on a park bench, and he invites him to come and share the home with him. And then it says O'Connor's unhappy daughter, Trudy, is running away from finishing school. She returns home unexpectedly, figures out, sizes up what's happening, and doesn't tell anyone who she is or who her dad is. And then he comes looking for her disguised as a butler. Meanwhile, O'Connor unwittingly competes with the XGI that's there in a land deal. The film, nominated Best Original Story, contains a worthwhile message of self-worth. Excellent. If you can get a hold of this. It happened on Fifth Avenue, and I can't tell you what the publisher is from 2007 Nostalgia Family Video, but it was published in 1947 in black and white. I think this was black and white. We absolutely enjoyed this, and I decided these were the original stealth campers, because they ended up with something like 26 people in that house in the winter and gave everybody shelter, but they had rules. This old bum had rules, and he said they had to make their beds, and they couldn't leave. They had to sweep and clean and keep their clothes clean, and they couldn't have any bad language, and the men couldn't cavort with the women. And so Mr. O'Connor's wife comes home, and she pretends to be a cook. And so Mr. O'Connor's so happy to smell his mulligan stew again, and they start to get a little bit more friendly with each other, and this guy walks in on them and tells them they'll have to separate, even though they're a married couple. And it's just a very nice, it has a Christmas scene in it too. And when spring comes, they all go out they come up from the basement through I guess what you would call it is a hole up in the cellar, and comes out in the backyard, and then they open a piece of fence which looks just like fence, but it's actually a door that they created. And so I thought you might like to enjoy it, especially since I've been talking about stealth camping and stealth. We can do so many things in stealth. You know, the Bible talks about when you do something for someone, you don't let the left hand know that what the right hand is doing, and that's kind of stealthy. Anyway, it just appealed to us all, and so I wanted to tell you about that. And also, I had this idea years ago, but I discovered that I was getting behind in a lot of things. My family was growing rather rapidly. There were always things to do. We're with a church. I just didn't have time to put things away sometimes, and it was time we eat most of our meals at home. There was just no relief, and I needed to be able to handle putting things away. So I decided to quit putting ornaments on trees, because always the company would be gone. The kids would be gone, and then I'd be stuck with undoing it all, and decided not to do it. So I've just been putting things in bowls around the house and enjoying it a lot more. And then people come in and they'll pick it up and look at it and say, oh, I like this one, I like that one. And I would keep these around probably all year because I like them so much. These came from Michael's years ago, and some of them have a little green on the top, and others have pink on the top. And I wish there was a name on them so I could look them up and get some other colors, but well, I thought you'd like to know that I don't want to, I want everything to be simple. So here's another bowl right here. And today, before you go and get yourself ready, and I hope you will get yourself ready, I got dressed up for you. I was rather apprehensive about coming here today. I just didn't know if I could make a smooth presentation, and I decided I'd just get dressed up for you. So I put on this other sparkly top I have that's been sitting in a drawer all year, and I'll share my teacup with you. It's an old one from, I'm trying to think what the name of it was. It's similar to Corel ware, but it was back in the 1980s. Let me see. Acropole. Arcopole. Arcopal, France. And it was sold when the first Walmart came out in a town that I lived in down in Texas. And so I got 2 sets of it. It's called the Apple Blossom. And I thought I had really come up in the world. It was the only really nice china set that I had. And I had the plates and everything. I still do. And we still use it. And it's very nice. So I wanted to share that with you. And so today I'm going to read a little bit from the Jane Austen diet book, because I found a section that I don't remember reading. Now that's the neat thing about getting older, is that when you read, it all seems like new adventure. So I'm going to read this section on Jane Austen, Drinks with Jane Austen, on the tea and the reason for the tea. And So let me just go through a few things about the home and the homemaking first to get you started. I want to share also some things I've done with homeschooling over the years that didn't work out, that I really regret, and different ways that I wish I'd done it. I even talked it over with my children after they were grown up and said, that's one thing I wish we'd never done. Oh, that's one thing I wish we had done. And what we realized is, no matter what, you can just continue your life, because that's what homeschooling is. It's your life. It's knowing things, doing things together. It's loving each other. It's learning to be loyal to each other. It's learning how to handle disappointments and problems and things in the family. And if you send your children to public school, you might think that they are educating them, but they're also teaching them how to think in a way different than their own parents would want. And you don't realize it till years later that they're doing more than educating too. Homeschooling is more than education, but public school is also more than education. There's something else going on. And one of the things that got me started in it was a book by Mel and I'm trying to think what his wife's name was. Gabler, Gabler. What are they teaching our children? And they had grandchildren that they were taking care of one time who brought home their history books, their math books, their science books, and they began to read them and discovered lies that were told in there, plus things told at such a slant as to make the children believe a different way of government, a different way of life, teaching them away from the creation and against their parents. And so that was what really got me started. And then I read NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education by Sam Blumenfeld. And that was very impressive and showed how they had infiltrated, this teachers union had infiltrated the education system and put books in there that parents didn't even know about or approve, and courses and curriculum. So I began to have so much anxiety over it that after a while I could not in good conscience send my children to school. But one of the big mistakes that I made was thinking that I had to follow. You see, the only training I'd ever had is I went to public school. And so my only reference to education was the way they did it in public school. Open a book, sit down, read, write the answers to the questions, and learn how to do this and how to do that. And then I discovered that they weren't responding well to this, and I began to worry that perhaps they needed something else. And even though I would never have said that the mother is not adequate, I would still go and look at what other people were doing, or what other homes, and I'd ask questions, well, how do you do this? And my son seems to be not responding to this or this, and they would. You see, it's like that old Twilight Zone episode by Rod Steiger, and I'm not recommending Twilight Zone, but back in the 50s, some people watched it, and I saw this by accident one time. I was sitting in a room and someone was watching it on a television, and I saw it and I was just horrified. And it was about a family that was trying to get away from the control of this certain business or this certain world or this certain type of people that wanted to enslave them and control them. So they got in a little travel trailer or caravan, and they started traveling around the states, and they went to the desert, and they went to other places, and they went to the forest, and everywhere they went, there were these awful people standing around a campfire waiting for them, and they didn't want those people around their family. So this is what happens when you start looking out there for answers that God has put inside of your heart already. You just haven't drawn them out. And I would ask somebody else I'd heard was homeschooling, well, what did she do about this or this, and what kind of subject, was the best, and what kind of book? And she'd say, oh, well, I can solve that for you. You come to our homeschool meeting. And so I would think all excited, and I'd tell the children, we're going to go to a homeschool meeting, and there'll be activities for you, and there's a party and everything. So I would go. And one of them I went to was so weird. they had hired, they wanted me to join because they want, people to give their fees, their yearly fees. They'd hired a lady who was going to test their children every year. And the test actually doesn't cost very much. You can order it online. You can order a test for your children. But why would you want to do that? You don't need to test them. There's no secrets going on. You're not going to find anything out from a test that you don't already know. I mean, you know what your children can spell and read, and you know where they are. Just give them a star in what they do, what they already know. But so they'd hired this group, this community group had hired this person to test their children, and then also she could come and give free lessons once in a while. So we all went to, I don't remember if it was someone's house or a private school that they had rented, and we had to pay, and we went in, and she was something like I had never experienced before. She was, was told later she was new age. She was a new ager, but it didn't matter because there were all kinds of homeschoolers, and so she could benefit they could all benefit each other, and they all thought that they were going to bring her to Christ. So she was in there doing, having the children do this little sit-down exercise. They were all in a circle, and she had all kinds of motions, and she was bringing down the silence and doing all kinds of things. And when all the way home, my children laughed and made fun of her. And I regretted terribly going to that group. But I mean, and my husband was there, and I thought, well, maybe we should, Then there was another group that somehow found us. This is long before the internet. This was long before the phones, the cell phones, just this quick communication or social structure. Somehow people found each other. And I was known in the neighborhood as a homeschooler in one of the states we lived in, and someone found us and said, would you like to come to our picnic? And I thought, well, yeah, children need to be socialized. And that was the big deal, Everyone was concerned about my kids being socialized, not realizing they were just happier being left alone. They were quiet, and they really didn't have... they really got more anxiety from social things, and really it's wrong to push your kids into social things, trying to make them more social. Just leave them alone and they'll grow at a natural rate. And some people are just naturally quiet, and the Bible talks about the quiet souls that God is pleased with. And so I went, and they had these, they had art projects for everyone, and for the boys it was one kind, and for the girls it was one kind, but they were so childish that my children just didn't want to participate. And one of the reasons is because when they were little, I always had some creative thing to show them, and they were always doing stuff with fabric and with paper and with toys that were creative. So when they came, see, what happens is a lot of homeschoolers come from public school. They don't come, and a lot of them don't come from families that are particularly creative anyway. And so they're just following sometimes a very shallow, childish curriculum, and that's fine for their children. Maybe that's the way that they should do that. But the rest of us, some of us, didn't like it because our children were so much more ahead of them. So we went to one of those, and my kids got a very bad impression. And the children also were not well behaved. And they would talk back to their parents, and they were swearing and everything. But you see, you have to understand, in anything that people do, when they're coming out of one world and coming into another, it's an adjustment. It takes a while for them to realize, we can't talk like that anymore. We can't live like that. And even with new Christians, you'll see this. So because of the stress of it all, I decided never again. And there were several other times when I bought a book or a curriculum because someone recommended it and I thought it was better, or they'd come to visit us and actually never really observed how well adjusted we all were, what a happy family we were, and instead we're focusing on the academics of it. And you see, academics cannot be the reason that you are homeschooling, because what if the public schools started to do better in academics? Would you still send them there? No, there's more to that. There's more than that. It's socialization, and it's spirituality, and it's mental, physical health, and things. They'd just be better off at home. And children are better off at home relating to their own family at first. They will adjust. And one of the things that people would say to me that was rather intimidating was, you're homeschooling, they will never get married. Well, this was the era, the 1980s, that people weren't getting married anyway. I mean, these people that were telling me that often weren't married but living with someone. But the reason they said that to me is to intimidate me, because they knew that it was important to me that my children get married and have a normal, well-adjusted life. And so they would say, well, they'll never get married if they're educated at home, because their idea was that if you go to school, then you'll meet someone. But as it turned out, they all got married, and most homeschoolers will tell you that. But that's the first thing they tell you, and yet they won't get married either. So I didn't think to say something about it, though. I didn't think to say, well, public school people aren't getting married either. And so those were some of the things that I regretted. And then I got a hold of a book called The Writing Road to Reading, because someone recommended it to me, because my little 6-year-old wasn't getting it at all. I mean, I would teach him one of the first lessons in the primer, the McGuffey Reader's Primer, and he just didn't connect the letters and the words or anything. There'd even be a picture there, and he could still not even guess. So I got this book that was recommended, The Writing Road to Reading. Well, it was the instructions in it were so complicated that I just broke down and cried, and I called the lady that recommended it to me, and she invited me over, and she told me, you just ignore all these instructions and go straight to the words. And then there was these little flashcards that showed there were 26 letters in the alphabet with 44 sounds, and just go to these words, and as they write each word, they started out real small with the letter A and then added another letter, and they'd have a note. She showed me a notebook that one of her children had done, and it took them from the very beginning to 2 years later, more complicated words, and how they write, and then they say the word as they write. They sound it out as they write, and they speak it as they write it. And when they start out with the alphabet and they're writing the ABCs, they have to speak those as they write them. But here's the problem. I also met a couple of mothers who they wanted desperately to homeschool, and they wanted to ask me, where do you get your curriculum, and do I have to ask the government's permission and all this stuff. And I was thinking, I wonder if they could homeschool, because these women could barely read and write themselves, and their communication was, what would I say, mostly slang and not able to communicate very clearly. But they wanted their kids out of that public school system, and so they decided they'll just go ahead and do the best they could and just keep them home. And do you know, within a few years, those children could read and write better than their parents. I don't know what all she did, but I think it was she just loved them, and they wanted to learn, and they figured it out. And I would have had a hope that those children could have learned to read or write. Now, I would not have said, oh, just keep them in public school because you're not educated enough. I wouldn't have said that, because I don't think anyone belongs in the public school, so it's just better for them not to be there. But today, I'm always amazed at this woman. She was so determined. Remember the book I read to you called Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington? His mother couldn't read or write, but she knew how to go find books for him. And she'd go and beg people, where can I get a blue-backed speller? Where can I get this book or that book? And she would hand it to him, and he learned to read and write, and his mother couldn't read and write. So don't have so little confidence in yourself. Your children are going to go way ahead of you. Believe me, especially if you don't put them in the public school where they squash their minds into a box. And so also, don't think so little of yourself as a mother. Mothers today are not honored in the West as much as they should be, and you can tell they feel inferior. But the Bible talks about mothers being blessed, and how I'm trying to think of a scripture that I read just recently about the mother, and it wasn't Her Children Rise Up and Call Her Blessed. It was another one, and I was thinking how the psychologists and the world and the educators have said to the parents, well, you have to earn your respect from your children. You have to earn the love from your children. You have to earn it all. You don't. You know, when you have a baby, that baby comes into your life. Did you earn it? No, it was a blessing. It was given to you by God. And so we should not want our parents to earn anything, because it's impossible. When you have children, you can't earn anything because there are some that you can't please, and it wouldn't matter how much you tried to earn their respect, they wouldn't get it. The point is, the Bible says they are to respect their parents and to honor them, and that parents are to bring their children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Nonetheless, we cannot go around analyzing whether or not a parent deserves to be able to educate their own children at home. Most mothers don't feel worthy of it, and it's possibly because of the daunting way in which the public schools and the colleges teach, make us think that it's all so complicated and so highfalutin that we can't do it. And so I would like for you to do something today, and it will include your homemaking, and this might help some of you who are struggling with the concept of homeschooling. And also remember, when you start getting discouraged, I sat here, ladies, so that you could see the snow in the background. We aren't going anywhere. Those cars aren't going anywhere either. They're going to get stuck down at the end because there's a big old snow pile. And I'm sorry I forgot to mention it when I first began, because I think it's melting a little bit. But in order to realize it's not just having confidence, but it's having obedience to the Lord. We're told in Deuteronomy 6 and in Ephesians 6 to teach your own children. There isn't any other way around it. You do it out of obedience, not because you think you're any good, not because you think the public schools are bad. You have to have a really good reason for homeschooling, because if you don't, then you can just change the minute it becomes inconvenient, the minute it becomes hard, the minute you start having doubts. So you have to start to commit the psalm, commit your way to the Lord, and He shall bring it to pass. So what I would suggest you do is get yourself a list ready. I had a list here. Get yourself a list ready of things you need to do at home, and maybe in your homeschooling, if that's what you're doing, and ask God to help bring it to pass. And the things, you might find that more things get done on that list than you thought possible. So focusing on the home and the homemaking, which is the subject I would like to get to next, is a way to improve your judgment. It's a way to reduce your anxiety. And it's a way to avoid discouragement, because you can have success. And just the little things, like if you're putting something away in the kitchen, you could just think about maybe this little can of spice. Where would it do me the most? Where could I get it most conveniently? And this is how women have discovered to keep their baking ingredients just above the place where they store their mixing bowls, so that they can just conveniently not have to walk from one end of the house to the next to get things. And just this good judgment of where to put things. Anything you pick up, if you think about where to put it, where it would make the most sense, and where it would be easily found again, or maybe not found. And so you start developing good judgment by running the home. And it's the same with homeschooling and raising children. They help you learn good judgment, especially by your mistakes. Also, I'd like you, if you're homemaking, that if you would if you could detach yourself, if you could live as though we don't have the internet, and don't connect yourself to the latest news, because I've noticed even the people that claim to be the ones that claim to be fighting against the tyranny that's going on and the war and all that, they still report the same things that these hooligans are doing, and that can bring a lot of anxiety. And we have to keep anxiety out of our lives if we're going to be any good to anyone. And I recently changed over the exercises that I was doing because I was more curious as to know what kind of movements help your internal organs and your stomach and your blood and everything else like that, and some muscles that have gotten injured, or any kind of physical ailments that you have. So I wanted to change over to something a little bit different. And it's interesting that if you're used to, like I grew up in the public schools, we had physical education, and it was all about jumping around and wearing yourself out and making your muscles sore, and how strong you were, how fit you were, and what shape you were in. But this other way, I found several places I can watch where there's really good instructions on how to strengthen your internal, your insides, how to strengthen everything. As you get older, of course, things start to change, and you get more aches and pains, and what to do with pain, how to handle pain, and I find those more health-giving for me now. But it's good to be curious and to look for different ways to do things. Now, I also wanted to say that if you're having a hard time focusing on your day and on your housework, to go for a walk first, and go for that walk inside of your house. Just walk from one end to the other, and as your body warms up, remember I told you about the 3-minute walk, normal walk to warm up your body, and then a 30-second fast walk, then slow back down. Do this 3 times. That this is the best exercise there is, and your mind starts to clear up, and you'll notice things that need to be done. It always helps to have a list of things that need to be done in the order that is urgent, the order of urgency. And then if you've got a place, this is just from my own experience, if you have a place in your house that's just been a sore spot for a long time and you can't seem to get at it because you're waiting for this big block of time when you won't have any interruptions, you won't have to stop and fix a meal, you won't have to go anywhere, no one's coming over, but it just doesn't get there, then what I would suggest you do is just do it in increments. Instead of saying, oh, I need 3 hours to finish this, to clean out the laundry room, or I need so many hours to do this, just give it enough time to do a few feet of it, or a little section of it, or the part beside the window, I have to clean out the area around the electric switch box, because I had some electric work done here, and the man that was doing it wanted me to go and turn off some things and turn on some things and stuff, and it was so difficult to get back there because of the boxes and storage that I realized I'm going to have to fix that. But then it daunted me because I thought, I'm going to need a whole week. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put it on my list as doing it in increments. So there are many things you can do in increments, even though it's very frustrating. I know as a sewist, I never like to cut anything out without sewing a little on it first, and then I don't like putting it away. I want to do the whole thing, but because it's hard. Sewing is like art. Once you get your mind into it, you want to just go with it, and while the interest is there, and while you have health and you're not getting a backache or anything, you want to sew. But I'm learning to do some things in increments just so that I can get something done of something. That might be helpful for you. Now, maybe not, but now one thing you can do, and that's one of the reasons I've told you to dress up for the home, is to treat the first step of being successful at home is to treat it like it is a great appointment. You have an appointment. It doesn't have to be a specific time, but getting ready for an appointment and then going and doing it. And so it's the first step in self-control and self-motivation and self-employment, is to treat it like it is a great appointment. It's very, very important. And that's how dressing up can help. And I thought I was really not interested in coming here today because I just felt a little bit like I didn't have anything particularly interesting to say, and I decided to just dress up, and it changed me a little bit so that I felt like it was important. And so maybe if you are not really, you're thinking that being home is boring or that the job you're about to do is boring, change your clothes. Think about changing your looks a little bit and dressing up for it. You know, in the olden days, you see this in the old movies, they always had a butler or maid, and they were dressed up in freshly starched clothing they were so dignified in the home. They were very clean, they were very methodical and very efficient. You think of yourself as, one day I'm going to sew one of those Victorian style aprons and the cap and everything, and kind of try to feel out what it would have been like with some of the things that they had to do. Now, so I wanted to also, since we've talked about getting dressed, and I've talked about doing things in increments if you can't seem to do it all. The other thing that I want to talk about is how to handle the press and the media to keep it from throwing you off, to make it so that you are not affected by it. And I don't know what book I read this in, but it was this lady, someone was always telling her, it might have been one of the old McGuffey readers, but there was a story in there, I think, where someone was always telling this lady of the wars and the rumors of wars and the things that were happening and the weather. And to mention the weather, people always knew there was going to be weather, and they kind of adjusted to it. Yes, there were disasters and tragedies, but I think sometimes the media enhances it so much that the fear can be pretty bad. So what I would suggest we do is pay attention to our own responsibilities. What does the news have to do with your responsibilities? How clean are your shelves? Have your books been sorted lately? Do you have a photo album? You know, that's one thing that's hard to do now because you've got to go get those pictures all printed off of your phone, but you need to have that because we might want to prepare to live in a world without a tech system. How you're the family archivist. How many things have you saved in an album of yours and your children's or your grandparents? You are going to have your own responsibility. There's so much to do, and you might start by making a list of all the things that you need to do. The world isn't going to do it for you, and that's one thing that homemakers find out after a while, is that they're going to be responsible for many different things, and things that were done for us before, we might have to do it ourselves. The other thing that you can do to reduce anxiety, I think, now some people are energized by going out, going to the shops, but if you're living in a place where there are a lot of restrictions, it might be more stressful, is to enjoy armchair shopping, which we used to do through the catalogs. And of course, you can't always be sure of the quality, but for some things, maybe if you know what the product is and you've seen it before, it might be very helpful. And you can also enjoy armchair concerts. I have grandchildren that play instruments, and I have an idea for one of my next events, if I have one next year. I'm going to have some kind of event here. I don't know if it's going to be a tea or a train ride, or I'm not sure. I haven't quite decided. Cooking show, whatever, but I'm going to have a singing minstrel. I'm going to have one of them go through, walk around and play the banjo or whatever and sing, or whatever instrument they're going to use. And I'm going to encourage the guests to bring flowers, and we'll do it the European way and throw roses at them. And so I was studying in this idea of being fearful all the time of what the world is up to. It's just one gross thing after another, isn't it? They just never... In fact, our brilliant governor has decided that she's going to fine people $500 for every offense. Every time they are without a mask and they get caught, $500 without a mask. And this is forever. And so I thought that I'd explain a little bit about why we can't put up with all this and how to overcome it. First of all, I came it 1 year just by being captive at home. I was just in captivity at home, and poor Mr. S, he had to run around and do everything. Well, now I'm having to run around doing everything because he wants to be home. And that is to keep in your mind the fact that we are citizens. In the U.S., we are citizens, not subjects. One of the problems some countries have is that the people consider themselves subjects of some ruler. And we are not, because our rulers are subject to us, and they are learning a big lesson as we teach them. You serve us, and we hired you. You're not paying us, we're paying you. And they want to reverse that, where they give us money, so then they boss us around. And so what we have to realize is we are citizens, not subjects. And as citizens, there's a big responsibility. If you've ever studied civics, back in the olden days, when you wanted to become an American citizen, you had to study civics. And what that was is what you would be responsible for as a citizen. You had to watch out for your neighbor. You had to be ready to do good works. You had to be give your country a good name by obeying the laws and staying out of trouble. And it's just like when you're raising a family. You don't want them to shame their mother. You don't want them to put shame on the family name. So you don't want them to do things that brings a cloud of grief over the parents. And we've seen that, haven't we, where these perfectly nice families suffer because one of the children decide that they're going to do the opposite of what they were taught, and they abandon good sense, and they abandon their family, and they go off and chase the world, and it's dreadful, isn't it? You know the feeling. And the police, even the police are subject to us. We hire them to protect us. And so when we realize that we are citizens, not subjects, and as citizens we are responsible to proclaim liberty throughout the land, and we are responsible to follow our beliefs and responsible to teach them, and and to teach what's good, what's healthful, what's cleanly, and it's not... Being a citizen of the U.S. is not about having a beautiful country and having Niagara Falls and all that. That's nice. But it's about being good stewards. But we draw the line when someone says, well, I've got beliefs too, and I want to follow my beliefs, and as a citizen I have a freedom to follow my beliefs, but I don't believe anybody else should be free, so I believe that I should enslave you all. We draw the line there. And that no one else should be free, only me. And so this is the way our governors are acting right now. But what's happening, and I'm sure that a lot of you are probably getting anxious and saying, well, why do we put up with it so long? We're not. There are things going on. But when you are ready to throw off a tyrannical government, you have to be very well planned and careful about what you do. Well, this is the same with raising a family and homeschooling. You've got to be careful what you do, because it could set you back if you make some of the wrong moves. And so if you're trying to get rid of a governor or a president or something like that, you've got to have all the proof, you've got to have all the evidence, you have to have papers filed properly, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed. If there's one, and the dates and everything, and the time you file it, all, and the right type of court and everything has to be done so carefully that it's going, the wheels of justice turn slowly. Everything has to be done so carefully, because one little mistake and the whole thing will get thrown out. So there are things in place that are going on, and I am not going to sink into discouragement or despondency over it, because things are going to happen and are happening right now. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the idea of the ugly duckling, because this goes back into the home and homeschooling. You know, we all start out, I can remember some of the mistakes I made I always wanted to have a pretty house, and I was married in the 70s when it was all kind of, what would you say? It looked like the lobby of a bank. The home interiors that people were trying to promote through magazines and stuff just wasn't something that I could do, and it was always expensive and unattainable, and so I made some pretty weird mistakes that didn't please me, didn't look very nice. Like I didn't want to buy curtains or drapes, so I'd hang something up there, a sheet or a blanket. It just looked awful. But as I went along, I learned how to make things a little bit more beautiful. It took some time. At first, it was pretty ugly, and some of my things that I did were just mistakes, But it's the same with homeschooling. The kids might seem a little bit immature and behind in things, and not developing into sophistication, and they maybe not even speaking clearly in the beginning. I know a lot of children struggle with speech and the English language, and I have never found one of them, by the time they reach the age of 20, they can speak perfectly. So you shouldn't worry about that. And it's the same with reading and writing and other things, and because by the time they're 20, it's the same with people who said what is it? It was something they were saying that your child would still be doing if you let them be little kids, because I always used to promote the idea, let them be children while they're children, because childhood is so fleeting. And remember the poem I read to you, hurry the baby fast as you can, hurry him, worry him, make him a man, off with his baby clothes into his pants, feed him on brain foods and make him advance. And then the poem goes on, it's by Nixon Waterman, and the poem went on to say, get him in college and make him advance, and after the cash, and then in the end he'll die of nervous exhaustion. and it's the idea is to say shame on us for hurrying our children. Be happy that they still want to sit by your side and have a book read to them. Be happy that your daughter wants to play with dolls even when she's an older child. And just be happy they want to be with you and they're clinging to you and you're hanging on to your apron strings. Remember how intimidating that was to hear someone say, you can't hang on to your mother's apron strings. Well, why not? Well, of course, women aren't wearing aprons, but I always wore an apron. My daughter wears an apron, and a lot of our homeschool family friends wear aprons, and they enjoy the charm of their children hanging on to this apron strings. And when they're real little, that's their security, to hang on to their mother's skirt or their apron strings. If you're not wearing skirts, you would never experience the sweetness of it, of them hanging on to a piece of your skirt. And so I just wanted to say that in homeschool, they might appear to be extremely awkward, maybe even look funny because they don't dress like the other kids, or just maybe not look very polished or anything like that. But by the time they're finished, and by the time they're older, they're going to be far more mature and beautiful. More so than the other kids who've been pushed into socialization, pushed into academics, pushed, rushed around all the time from one activity to another. Those kids are dying of nervous exhaustion already, and their faces are starting to show it. They're starting to look more older than their age. So let them grow at a natural rate. Remember, in that poem, once children grew at a natural rate, now we develop a man while you wait. And so look up that poem, Hurry the Baby, by Nixon Waterman, and be ashamed of yourself if you're pushing your children and you're too anxious for them to grow up, because it'll happen too fast. You'll be very sorry. I was walking through my house the other day thinking about how they would get up out of bed in the morning, and then just kind of come in through the house, and I'd already be up, and I'd see them, and I'd say, "You're up! Did you woke up?" And I was so happy to see them. And I was joking around with one of my older kids the other day, and I said, I miss you kids coming into the room, and I'm saying you're up and you're so excited because you woke up, and you're back. And so could we just do that again? Next time you're here, you get up, come through the house in your pajamas, and I'll be up and I'll say, "You're awake." So commit your way to the Lord, and he shall bring it to pass. So commit all these things that are concerning you. Make a list of it. Commit your ways to the Lord. Ask him to help you, and he will bring it to pass. And dress for your life at home, which is beautiful. Don't bore your children wearing crummy old clothes all the time. Dress up for it. And also, especially for you that can't go anywhere, or whose towns are locked down by these crazy governors and premiers. They're the ones that aren't stable. It's us that are doing well. Today I'm going to read out of Jane Austen's, out of the Jane Austen diet. And as you can see, it's getting a little darker out there, and I think it's melting off. Yeah, it's always so ugly when it melts off. It turns black, doesn't it? So, this is by Brian Kozlowski. I also have another book, At Home with Jane Austen, by Kim Wilson. Now, she also wrote Tea with Jane Austen. She might have wrote one other, but I would like to read this to you next time, and it's about, let me just tell you what it's about. What a close-knit, affectionate family they were. Now, she doesn't write with the wit that Brian does. That's why I like him. It reminds me of my boys. That's the way they talked when they were growing up. And so I've read this to you before, but I was rereading it thinking, I didn't get enough out of it. So I'm going to read it again. And for some of you that missed out, okay? So this is a book, for those of you who are new. This young man did such an excellent job of, we watch the Jane Austen movies, we read the Jane Austen books. There were 7 novels, I guess one that was not finished. And we see this witty romantic farce going on, and we see the characters, we see the ones with the bad intentions and the ones with the good intentions, and we see a few things, about Regency life, but he dug a little deeper, almost like he had an index or a, like what's in the back of your Bible, and you look up the words in alphabetical order, and he found many references to the food, to the way they lived, to, for instance, in one chapter, he said they were never out at night. These Regency balls were not at night. And then he also looked up things like the way they exercised, and also the way they communicated, and their socialization, and the times that they were alone. And he pieced together pretty good chapters on this, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to read this to you, even though I've almost been here an hour. It's called Drinks with Jane, and I was a little bit daunted by it because I thought, I don't want to read anything about alcohol because I don't want to promote that, but I'll just read the part about tea, okay? Lovers of alliteration may wonder why I didn't style this chapter Drinks with Darcy. As in, let's all stumble down to the village tavern where the men of Austenworld are gathered, riveting the crowd with a few tips on holding their liquor, for very good reasons. Number 1, I'm rather hopeless at imparting macho tips, and B, the smartest drinking advice doesn't come from Austen's men at all. It comes from her women. Goodness, this is such a fine book that the pages are of paper that is like parchment, and they're hard to turn. It's just really nice paper. When I read a book, I like a book that feels good, that I can touch. There's some paper that just gives me the creeps, but I like to feel it and hold it. And this is that wonderful paper, kind of an off-white, and it's rather thick, but it has tooth. You'll have to take Jane's word for it. The hearty injunction, "Go and drink a little more," comes from one of her female characters, and by and large, it's her women who have figured out how to do just that in the healthiest way possible. Austen's men, on the other hand, usually lag a few wobbly paces behind. Don't get me wrong, Jane wasn't a raving food feminist. But when it comes to hydrating healthfully, it's best to get in touch with your inner Austen heroine. Speaking of which, should imagination fail you, wrapping one's shoulders in a makeshift shawl usually works wonders. He makes a good point there. When I was wearing the walking skirt, the Regency walking skirt the other day, and I went out for a Jane Austen walk, the feeling was so much different. So I would suggest, yes, wrap a shawl around yourself and get the feeling. One of the things I wanted to emphasize about shawls is they're really more practical than coats or sweaters or jackets, because you can loosen them when you get too warm, you can tighten them when you get too cold, and you can put things in them and carry them, and they're just more practical. After all, to drink their good health is a loaded expression in Jane's novels, one involving far more secrets than just popping a cork. So flakens down and boots off the table, please. This is how Regency girls quench a laudable thirst. But indeed, I would rather have nothing but tea. Let's start with the go-to beverage, the drink all heroines should prefer to anything. Find the words drink or drinking in a Jane Austen sentence, and you're almost guaranteed to find a nice cup of tea at the end of it. Emma alone has 15 tea references. Mansfield Park has 8. Coffee? Yeah. Cocoa? Nope. I'm much obliged to you, but I prefer tea. It all seems rather quaint and cutesy to us. Ah, tea with Jane Austen. Warm fuzzies emanate from the very phrase. But there's more to Jane's offer of tea than a few crocheted doilies and pinky-up fingers. In fact, Austen's promotion of tea was practically edgy by Regency health standards. A relatively new and exotic leaf from far-flung China, leaf pronounced with a knowing wink and nudge, tea was still regarded as something of a novelty drug to the English. Its side effects were mild but confusing. Tea seemed able to simultaneously pep people up and calm them down. No one knew quite what to make of it. Apothecaries' shops, the pharmacies of the day, were still selling tea as a type of medicine, adding to its mystique and sparkle a national debate over the health or harm of this herbal potion. Austen's view of tea was practically edgy by Regency health standards. While some thought it perfectly safe to sip tea, many doctors had serious concerns. The teapots full of warm water I see upon their tables put me in mind of Pandora's box, from whence all sorts of evil issue forth, wrote the physician Samuel Tissot in 1768, less than a decade before Austen's birth. After the debate continued, as Jane attempted her last novel, Sanditon. And I understand someone has tried to complete that novel the way they did Elizabeth Gaskell's novel, Wives and Daughters, and didn't do a very nice job of it. In it, a character named Arthur Parker believes that drinking tea is tantamount to a trippy drug experience. It acts on me like a poison, and would entirely take away the use of my right side before I had swallowed it 5 minutes. It has happened to me so often that I cannot doubt it. The use of my right side is entirely taken away for several hours. Given the fact that Mr. Parker is the biggest buffoon in the novel, it's obvious which side of the tea debate Austen was on. Though despite having no way of scientifically knowing if this exotic brew was healthy or not, Jane spoke up for tea with the tree-stumping passion of a Lorax. Even today, there are few greater tributes to drinking tea than those found in Jane Austen's novels. Perhaps you would like some tea? Every smart heroine confidently answers yes. The heroine of Sanditon even makes a bold prediction that one day it will be the simplest thing in the world to prove the effect tea has on the body by those who have studied tea scientifically and thoroughly understand all the possibilities of their action on each other. Meanwhile, Austen reminds her characters to drink up. You must drink tea. It's the closest Jane gets to issuing a dietary command. Turns out she was brilliantly correct. I got a tea from someone the other day because I needed to buy something that had milk thistle in it for Mr. S. for his health. And I believe it benefits the liver. And so I got some that had grapefruit in it, and the scent is just wonderful. It doesn't have any color in the water, but the scent is just so pleasing, and it just wafts through the whole house. And that's why I think you should serve tea in fine teacups, because it justifies the beauty of the scent and the color of the tea and just the whole ceremony. I don't use teapots as much as I used to. I like to dip my tea bag in the cup. That way I have a fresh, hot cup of tea every time, and it doesn't get cold or start to taste funny. So I wanted to tell you about that. I'll try to bring it like next time. I can't remember what the name of the product was. It was pretty nice, though. Tea now solidly ranks as one of the healthiest drinks on the planet, thanks to decades of modern research by those who have studied tea success scientifically and thousands of years of human observation. It was already China's national beverage in 350 AD. Tea is now the easiest, cheapest, safest, and most potent super drink in your dieting arsenal. There's so many teas and tisanes and flavored hot drinks that are beneficial. Important clarification. I'm just talking about regular tea, the dried leaves of the camellia shrub, the tea plant, steeped in boiling water. The same tea the herbalists of ancient China recognized as the elixir of life. The same tea Austen eagerly purchased from Twinings in 1814 and pours out so frequently in her novels. The same tea steaming in tubby pots around the world, be it black, green, white, or Earl Grey. The only difference? We now better understand why everyone should be, as Jane says, in serious quest of tea. Refresh. There's an insightful line in Mansfield Park that hints at the first miracle of tea. Fanny quenches her thirst with a little tea, and it soon refreshed her body. Science can now confirm that tea literally does just that, refreshing our bodies on a cellular level. Tea contains an abundant source of polyphenols, powerful antioxidants. Cannot say it right. Antioxidants. These are nature's protective chemicals, a Molotov cocktail of defense compounds helping plants stay strong by warding off unwanted pests and diseases. They do practically the same thing in our bodies whenever we eat or drink them, boosting our ability to fight cell damage in our organs, particularly the heart. He mentions that tea packs a very strong punch. Countries with the highest green tea consumption, such as Japan, have some of the lowest rates of cancer and cardiovascular disease, not to mention equally low obesity rates. Another likely power punch from polyphenols. According to research from the University of California, the polyphenols in tea can aid weight loss by acting like prebiotics, encouraging the growth of metabolism, boosting bacteria in our gut. Essentially, tea can help us burn fat without us getting up. Not entirely recommended, but certainly a recognized benefit of tea back in the 18th century. The proper use of tea, wrote Samuel Johnson in 1757. I've mentioned him in several of my videos. Try to read from one of his books sometime. Is to dilute the full meals of those who cannot use exercise. Accordingly, those who cannot use exercise in Austen world cannot seem to live without tea either. The elderly Mrs. Bates, for instance, was a very old lady, almost past everything but tea. Soothe. Tea is the cup that cheers, according to William Cowper, a famous poet of Austen's. And obviously, one of her favorite beliefs about tea. In almost all her novels, tea is a liquid mood booster, magically bringing comfort and content with every sip. It's the first thing that soothes Catherine's jaded spirits after her nightmare at Northanger Abbey, and tea is there to calm Fanny's head and heart following her emotional journey from Mansfield Park, all very accurate observations. Tea literally enhances the way we think. And that reminds me, I did have a tea room once for about 2 years, and it was interesting how the people that came and had tea, the serious subjects that they talked about, never a discouraging word, but very interesting that it wasn't anything trivial. They could talk at length on many different subjects after they'd had a cup of tea. It seems no trauma in England that can't be made infinitely better by a nice cup of tea. It's the national reaction for bad breakups, scraped knees, divorces, and general life stress. Right then, I'll put the kettle on. This was spectacularly demonstrated during the London bombings in 2005, when local shopkeepers rushed to the shocked, dazed, and wounded with what else? Bracing cups of tea. A very British response to terror, said the New York Times. But it was Austen's exact response, too. After the stress of Marianne's near-death experience, Eleanor seeks immediate solace in a nice cup of tea, leaving Marianne still sweetly asleep. She joins Mrs. Jennings in the drawing room to tea, and the present refreshment was particularly welcome. Clearly, not knowing L-theanine by name didn't stop Austen from recognizing its happy effects. Before tea, it was a rather dull affair, but after tea, we all cheered up. None of her characters became wired or buzzed after drinking tea, even when taken at night. Evening tea drinking is habitual in Jane's novels. Even the most sensitive body in Austen world, Mr. Woodhouse, cannot imagine tea interfering with sleep in the slightest. On the contrary, you will get very tired when tea is over, he tells Emma. Today, tea is just as gentle on our own bodies, the safest way to get measured dose of caffeine. A drug by any other name, caffeine comes some naturally stressful side effects, heart palpitations, hypertension, and anxiety, but its presence in tea comes with equal natural safeguards. I must warn you not to make it too strong, and that's one of the problems with making it in a cup. Some people just don't understand. It has to look rather clear and a little weak. You cannot make it so black that you can't see through it. You have to be able to see the cup through it, see all the little flowers in the teacup. There's even with the tisanes and the herbal teas, you have to be so careful. They don't have caffeine in them, but there are other things in them that could bother you if made too strong. Just make them weak. Even the strongest black teas have half the caffeine of coffee. Lighter green teas have 1/6 the amount. Then there's the tea's unique chemical makeup. The calming presence of L-theanine naturally counteracts the more unpleasant side effects of caffeine, neutralizing the jitters caffeine would normally induce. You can't say the same for coffee, a drink with far more caffeine without the soothing balance of L-theanine. Interestingly, Austen didn't say much for coffee either. It wasn't a usual beverage in the Austen household, and Miss Bates refuses it outright in Emma. No coffee, I thank you, for me. Never take coffee. A wise move. Miss Bates has enough unnatural jitters to get on with. She'll stick with a little tea, if you please. Dietitians might even be returning to one of the biggest reasons Austen drank tea in the first place. It was healthier than water. Before modern filtration techniques, Regency water was infamously risky to drink. Austen noticed dirt in her water decanter in 1804, and Tobias Smollett, another period novelist, noticed a bit more than that. If I would drink water, I must quaff the mawkish contents of an open aqueduct, exposed to all manner of defilement. This alone made tea an incredible health boon to Austen and her contemporaries. The boiling water required to make tea effectively killed any microbes within. And while mass germicide may no longer be our reason for putting the kettle on, there's reason enough to swap out a plain glass of water for a nice cup of tea. After studying more than a decade of tea research in 2006, Dr. Ruxkin from the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition reported her findings to the BBC. Drinking tea is actually better for you than drinking water. Water is essentially replacing fluid. Tea replaces the fluid and contains antioxidants, so it's got two things going for it. The report went on to confirm that tea is just as hydrating as water. The minimal amount of caffeine in tea isn't enough to dehydrate our cells. I just want to remind you to make it, if you're making it in the cup with a tea bag, just dip it in slightly and make it weak. You can use that tea bag half the day, almost all the day that way. However, treating tea like Regency water cooler is only smart if you're drinking it correctly, and luckily Jane has a few things to say about how people should take their tea, her basic guidelines just as relevant and reliable today. How much? At the very least, tea is sipped twice daily in Austen world, during breakfast and a few hours after dinner. So she says they would have approximately 4 cups a day. What type? Austen was an equal opportunity tea drinker, enjoying black and green tea and rarely differentiating between the two. So, cream? Careful, Jane only admired people who don't put cream in their tea. There are 2 traits in her character which are pleasing, she wrote about a new acquaintance. Namely, she admires Camilla, the novel, and drinks no cream in her tea. Sugar? Austen wasn't against adding sugar to tea, but she did view it as something reservedly special, and then tea and sugar, her explanation implying a sweet treat and not an everyday habit. Essentially, Austen wasn't gulping down warm sugar water the whole day. Like most modern green tea drinkers, she probably didn't even need sugar in her daily cup. Green tea is famously easy to drink without sugar. Yeah, you don't need sugar. So, now I want to stop reading that. I didn't quite finish the chapter, but maybe we could continue another time. And I hope that you got a few things done while you were listening today. I wouldn't say while you were walking. I did go on my Regency walk. I put those rubber boots on and a big coat, and I walked around and put footprints in the snow where no one had been before, and felt quite proud of myself. And so I did my Regency walk today. I've done my little, I guess you would call them exercises, but they're not really exercises. They're just body adjustments. And I have made my slow cooker. I have a little small slow cooker, and I've put a delicious soup in there. And see what else I've done. I've cleaned up 2 rooms and made a mess in another one, and hung the laundry on the. I think I was going to move this so you could see what I've done, where I've hung my laundry, okay? Yeah, see, I have a little rack there. My dryer quit working quite a while ago, so I turned off the switch, in the electric box, and not going to have anything to do with it until someone comes and fixes it. And I don't mind. I kind of like the crispness of air-dried clothes, and especially the towels. I don't mind at all. And so, ladies, I hope that you will leave a comment if you have time. I had been told again to do a live stream. I won't do that because you have to stop and look to see who's writing to you and say hi to them, and I couldn't get my message out if I kept doing that. So don't forget, make yourself a list and ask God to commit your commit your ways to the Lord, and He will bring it to pass. And list all the things you'd like to do, and you might be surprised you get more done than you realize. So, also I've made a salad and put it in the fridge. I make one that's big enough that you can use it for maybe 2 days, and so I've got a lot more to do on this list today, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you first, and I hope that it got you going in your home and that it encourages you in some way. So try to have fun, in your life at home. And whenever you think about worrying about something, ask yourself, what things that were my duty to do, my responsibilities, have I done all my responsibilities? And not only do you have responsibilities to guide and guard the home, to keep house, as the Bible says, but also you have responsibilities to grow in your character. And if you want to know more about character, you just go to my previous video where I discussed it, or you can look it up. The word character is in the Bible. And so you have responsibility to improve yourself, improve your mind, improve the way you think, and improve your health. There's so much to think about. We just really don't have time to think about the media and the world and what they're doing to us. And of course we know that the stress is all out there in the commercial world, because we're confronted with things that are different. We no longer feel as free and easy in our towns, and there's always some kind of restriction or something changing, and so it's not something that I think we can do anything about. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens, and always be as optimistic as we can for our families. So ladies, keep close to God, and I will talk to you later. Bye.